I really should be heading to bed soon, but this is where I want my mind to be. The question is, philosophically, does free will exist? I wanted to use a spiral dynamics model to understand it, but then I started realizing it's a lot more confusing than I thought. So, just to begin, the VT1, 2, 3, or 4 here is referring to my model that divides it into 4 stages. And I did this for symmetry, realizing that one of them could be divided into 2, because the one preceding the transcendent stage, I like to call it, involves 2 different parts. They overlap, and they may even mix and match at times. That's something interesting. But the point is that you have symmetry. And so the question was, does symmetry mean that there's no free will? So let's explore that. Is this model of spiral dynamics predictable? What did I say? I said yes, it is predictable. Why? Because there is symmetry. If there is symmetry, that means that the mind's going to be predictable in how it's going to evolve. So there is no free will. And of course, I ended up realizing that's not 100% because the universe may have symmetry. And in the future, we may see an elegant symmetry to that. So that answer is not complete. Another answer is yes, there is symmetry and no free will in the sense of nodule activation. But how those nodes become active can't be predicted. And therefore, free will exists for the individual and not for the masses. This follows the line of reasoning that the government is controlling how the public thinks. This is not a conspiracy. I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to a factual phenomenon that the leaders are controlling how we think in passing because that's how we survive. We naturally want to survive, so we'll just follow the system that exists. Okay, then you have, is the model of spiral dynamics predictable? Yes, it's predictable, but only to an extent. Why? Because the complexities of desire determine how someone decides to act and which stage they will be at. And those complexities correlate to how communities currently set up their value systems. Pre-existing paradigms determine the stage. That's conclusion. Pre-existing paradigms determine the stage. Okay. This I wanted to skip. So let me just, before I get to this, I wanted to focus more on this. So is the model of spiral dynamics predictable? It is predictable because complexities of desire determine how someone decides to act. Oh, we're talking about the ego. So so your complex ego structure, all the ego needs, which correlates to my four main desires, is good. All that complexity is good to determine stuff. But not only that, the 4 main desires is one aspect, but then there's a whole separate thing called community-based desires. This may overlap with the feminine stages. There's always a feminine need to have community. You don't like solitude is a masculine trait, and then there's the feminine trait, which is to reach out to a community. And when it comes to a community, you're going to be shaped by them naturally. Your desire to conform, your desire to want to please, your desire to want to be a part of something, that is part of what's shaping your value system. And because of those value systems, it's going to determine the stage. And I realized that this actually gets very complicated because in my theory on activation and free will, you can go to an advanced civilization, right? Let's say you're in tier 16 over here. You go to an advanced civilization, and what takes place? What takes place is you have these extraordinary belief systems that we're all one, and therefore you're not allowed to harm yourself. Like some random ideas that maybe sound religious almost because they just have a different conception of reality. And you go to that place, you'll start adopting those assumptions. Why? Because of this feminine concept of communities, pre-existing paradigms, and wanting to conform, wanting to be a part of a community. And this is nothing against human nature. In fact, this probably has to do with a fundamental facet to survival, presuming that complex creatures like us function in a similar way. And obviously that is a stretch, and it's a projection, based on our human paradigms. I agree with that. I'm just throwing something out there that may or may not be symmetrical and consistent with the entire universe of species, assuming they exist. the idea is that if there is a parallel between Piaget's lifespan development and being born to later tiers, there is a predictable zone. This presumes the parallel isn't created by the mind and contributes to reality, which based on the Heisenberg principle is a strong possibility. That we all know that Heisenberg talked about how your thoughts and your intent intervene with the experiment and to such an extent that the results are not the same had you not been looking and observing. And so, different people have different extrapolations. There are some implications that strangely could be possible based on this premise, and there's so much depth that's built on this idea. But this means that you're contributing to the truth just by observing it, just by saying, okay, this is what it is. We see symmetry, it's symmetry. And then everyone else is going to say, yeah, I see symmetry too, yeah. But you can view it completely different, and it's really the models that kind of get accepted that are the ones we say are true. Because we have peer review, and we have everyone saying the same thing. And presuming that because everyone sees the same, then it's a sign of truth. But yet again, if you throw out peer review as so relevant, then you can't work in an organized way. And so that's why this section was not something I was looking forward to going through. Therefore, the way we think is determining the outcome and acknowledging your own participation in its creation influences free will and what gets shaped and understood to be true. And therefore, it's not a useful approach to reality if you want to create something, especially since the minds of the public generally adopt definitives. So if we're already adopting definitives and we have peer review and we have a way of understanding stuff, then just go with that way of doing it. Find the way that they're thinking that coincides with how you're doing it. And therefore, you can create something with the most power possible because you know how it works. Now, the problem is, if you're not careful, then you'll sound crazy to the academic community because you're throwing out words like spirit, descent, the spirit's descent, which I have seen in transpersonal psychology because that's what the field is about, talking about what happens before and after you die. It's any experience that goes beyond the mundane, the physical, what you normally sense, and so it's territory that very few have traversed. Okay, so that's the rundown. In summation, we have the complexities of there being symmetry and what that entails. We have the complexities of if there is symmetry, does that mean it's fixed and therefore there's no free will? And if it's not fixed, is the ego's participation or lack thereof contributing to that facet? And if they are contributing, how much free will do they have? Is there a way to predict how it's going to act? And the answer is we could probably predict it so long as it's objective to the experiment. And so I may want to throw that into the description on the bottom. And yeah, now you got a whole picture that encompasses all my other videos. So I may delete those other videos. I may save them. I'm not sure yet. But it took me a while to get to this, and that's why it was really hard to give over this video tonight. Right now it's 11:17 p.m. October 4th, and have a good one.